There's a lot of talk today in organizations about culture, learning cultures, just cultures, cultural change. All these things are important to us, but first we have to begin to understand what it is we're asking for. What is a culture? Ed Schein gives us a really nice model of culture where he talks about artifacts, beliefs, and assumptions. I'm going to go ahead and explain these in terms that are usable for us. For example, in this artifact or action area, what we're talking about are the visible organizational structures, processes, and the actions that we see people taking. When we move down below this blue line, what we see are strategic goals and philosophies that are attached to our beliefs, our espoused beliefs about the organization. And then this bottom thing down here, these assumptions, these are the unconscious, taken for granted for deep beliefs and perceptions, the way we believe everything should be inside the organization. Now let's put this into the context of some of the things that have happened to us and also in the context of cultural change. Let's use a quote from Dudley Moore. Dudley Moore says, "The best safety device is a cop in your rearview mirror." Well, there may be some truth to that. But as we start to think about that, that cop in the rearview mirror is really only affecting action. What I mean by that is as long as the cop is there, the actions of the driver will be changed simply because of the policeman's presence. What has not happened is any change of deep assumptions. In order for the actions to change in the long term, the deep assumptions have to change. We think of this like a buoy floating on the water. If the actions that we see are the things that we see is the buoy, and the beliefs are the anchor line that takes us to the anchor that anchors the buoy in a specific position, then if we simply try and push actions and never move the assumptions, as soon as we stop pushing, what's going to happen? The buoys are going to come right back over the anchor of assumptions. So if we want to have a cultural change in the organization, we have to focus at a deep assumptions level. Now this is hard to do. This requires generative learning. And generative learning means simply to challenge those assumptions. But think about how hard that is. It's a difficult thing to do to get people to challenge assumptions. Usually when you get into this territory, people get very defensive. So one of the things that we have to think about if we are going to institute any kind of cultural change is how can we change the barriers to learning? How can we approach people in a way where they're interested in challenging those assumptions? Now let me put this in the context of a hero. One of my heroes is Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold started out in the Forest Service as a ranger, like many other rangers, with deep aspirations to becoming a forest supervisor, which he ultimately attained. But let's look at a couple of the steps along the way. Aldo started out in wildlife management to manage for game species. And one of the things that he ardently believed at the time was that he had to eradicate all of the predators in our system. And that continued for some time until, according to his writings, he shot a wolf, a she-wolf. And he wrote a story, the first story, Think Like a Mountain, and then the second one, Fierce Green Fire. When he wrote Fierce Green Fire, he had really reflected on those deep assumptions that he held. The deep assumption that he held that predators needed to be eradicated shifted to an understanding of the importance of predators in the ecosystem. His whole life changed. Aldo Leopold went from advocating the destruction of predators to advocating a balanced ecosystem and became literally the father of our modern environmental movements. That's the kind of change in assumptions that we see in great leaders and great people in our society. The ability to reflect on even the strongest deep beliefs that they have about how the world works and to challenge those for themselves and to ultimately change the world.